Two new reports show the massive scope of Russia's disinformation campaign during the 2016 presidential election. An independent report prepared for the Senate Intelligence Committee shows Russians used every major social media platform to help elect President Trump. The report also says Russia worked to discourage opponents of then-candidate Trump from voting, especially minority groups like African Americans. The Senate Intelligence Committee has not said whether it endorses the findings. But in a statement, Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Republican Richard Burr of North Carolina said, quote, "This newly released data demonstrates how aggressively Russia sought to divide Americans by race, religion, and ideology, and how the IRA actively worked to erode trust in our democratic institutions." Olivia Gazis is in Washington. She's a CBS News intelligence reporter, and she joins me now. Thanks so much for being with us, Olivia.
Thanks for having me, Vlad.
So we are hearing about the Internet Research Agency, the IRA, in this report. First, remind our viewers what that is and what new information we've learned about it.
Sure. Well, we've been hearing about the Internet Research Agency for a while now because it's been cited by the special counsel. It's been indicted as a part of that ongoing investigation. And we know it to be a Kremlin-linked internet company that engages in influence operations. This, again, is a sort of deep dive by these two reports that are based on the Senate Intelligence Committee's data that it provided to these two companies to really do a deep dive to understand what exactly the Russians were after, who they targeted, how widespread the problem was. And it turns out it was a lot more multifaceted and sophisticated than we originally knew. And this is information that's still coming to the fore nearly 3 years after it happened.
So what did the report say about who was being targeted by the IRA?
Well, so we know from these two reports that the targeted groups were it was both an indiscriminate effort and it was a targeted effort because they produced, seeded, and disseminated content that targeted left-wing groups, right-wing groups, religious groups, and racial groups. One of these reports by the New Knowledge Company said that the IRA's most prolific efforts on both Facebook and Instagram specifically targeted African-American communities, which actually meant developing audiences and recruiting some American individuals as assets to sort of carry out jobs, do tasks. Some of them attempted to connect on very personal issues. One instance cited, sex addiction. So these were Russian individuals who were reaching out to American individuals in an effort to get them to engage on things that they saw were furthering their objectives.
So let me read a little bit from the report here, Olivia. It says, quote, "What is clear is that all of the messaging clearly sought to benefit the Republican Party and specifically Donald Trump. Trump is mentioned most in campaigns targeting conservatives and right-wing voters, where the messaging encouraged these groups to support his campaign." Up until this point, a lot of the reporting out there had suggested that the purpose of this disinformation campaign was to just sow chaos and to undermine our democratic institutions. But now this report seems to suggest that it was specifically advancing the candidacy of Donald Trump.
That's right, and that's a very important point, and I'm glad you highlighted it, Vlad, because both of these reports support what the intelligence community had long ago concluded in a report they issued in early 2017, indicating that the Russian government's efforts were as a result of a sort of declared preference for then-candidate Trump. And so a lot of this content was meant to undermine Hillary Clinton's candidacy and bolster that of candidate Trump. You have heard some administration officials cast doubt on that notion. Secretary Nielsen from the Department of Homeland Security in particular has said, as you pointed out, that really the point was to sow discord and confuse people and undermine the integrity of information that was available. And in fact, the House Intelligence Committee, the Republicans in issuing their final report also said, we're not entirely sure that Putin's strategic objective in this effort was to have Donald Trump elected. But as we see from these two very comprehensive reports, it does look as though that effort was intended to bolster his candidacy and undermine Hillary Clinton's.
Now, we've received from the moment that this report was issued, or at least first reported by the Washington Post, we've seen statements from social media companies like Facebook, like Twitter, Instagram. But I wonder, throughout the course of this investigation, what does our reporting turn up about how forthcoming these companies have been with people looking into the use of their platforms to sow this disinformation?
It's interesting because obviously a number of these companies have suffered sort of reputational blows as a result of what they purportedly allowed to happen and how little they worked with congressional investigators in order to uncover what happened. Both Facebook and Twitter did issue statements, as you mentioned, saying that they had fully cooperated and made major strides to prevent further election interference on their platforms. But these reports that are out today indicated that that may not necessarily be the case. They dinged both Facebook and Twitter for not providing a fully robust set of data to the congressional committees that were investigating them. They indicated there was metadata that they could have supplied that they potentially withheld. They said that in their testimony itself, they may have been evasive and even misrepresented some of what they knew. One of these reports indicated that Instagram was a far greater factor in some of the targeting by the Russian government that actually went on. So it did raise an important question about what else these companies will need to do going forward in order to rectify some of what happened and protect against what may happen in the lead up to 2020.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about what the Senate Intel Committee is prepared to do given these findings. But I want to just focus one more time on this one specific characteristic of this Russian operation. And again, I'm going to quote from the report. The Internet Research Agency created an expansive cross-platform media mirage targeting the Black community, which shared and cross-promoted authentic Black media to create an immersive influence ecosystem. So they were targeting African Americans and other minority groups, the LGBTQ community, to what end?
They were, and it was a sort of very illuminating indication of just how savvy they were about America's political divisions and social divisions that they were able to effectively exploit. They not only did that, they engaged in voter suppression campaigns. They engaged in a lot of disinformation involving voter registration. They were really looking to pit groups against one another, generate a lot of suspicion, generate a lot of resentment, and effectively playing on emotions that they knew ran high surrounding these issues and within these communities.
So interesting. So, Olivia, what happens next? What is the Senate Intel Committee expected to do?
Well, these reports were released as part of its ongoing investigation into what the Russians did in 2016. The Senate Intelligence Committee's work continues on that front. They're expected to issue their own report on social media interference in the coming weeks or months. We don't have a timeline. We also expect several other reports on the Obama administration's response to what exactly happened. And, of course, the sort of big enchilada, as people like to put it, of whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign colluded or conspired with individuals associated with the Russian government. All of that is still forthcoming.
To be continued. Olivia Gazis, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Vlad.